You will spend 90,000 hours of your life at work. That is not an exaggeration. That is the actual math. And most people never stop once to ask if those hours are buying them anything real. Picture 6:30 on a Tuesday morning. The alarm has already gone off twice. Your eyes open on their own because your body learned the shape of this day a long time ago. You reach for your phone before you even sit up. 19 unread messages. 2 from your manager, Renata, sent at 11:45 the night before. She works late. She assumes everyone else does too. You walk to the bathroom in the dark because turning on the light feels like too much effort this early. You look at yourself in the mirror while you brush your teeth. You are 29. The person looking back seems older, worn around the edges in a way sleep never quite fixes anymore. You put on the uniform you did not know you were agreeing to when you took this job. A gray polo with a small embroidered logo, dark slacks, shoes chosen for comfort because comfort was the only choice you were allowed. You eat a protein bar standing at the counter because sitting down for breakfast stopped being part of your life 2 years ago. You drive the same 11 miles. You always drive, past the same gas station, the same school, the same stretch of road where traffic slows for no visible reason. You park in the same numbered spot outside a beige building with tinted windows and a company name most people in town could not explain if you asked them. You badge in. You sit down at the same desk you have used for 3 years and open your laptop, and the emails start again as if they never stopped, because they never really do. Somewhere underneath it all, a quiet, tired voice asks the same question it has been asking for longer than you want to admit. Is this the whole thing? Is this what all those years of trying were supposed to lead to? Let me take you back to where this actually started. You were 22. Fresh out of a state university with a degree in supply chain management, a subject you picked because a career counselor said logistics companies were always hiring. Your student loans sat at just under $31,000 the week you graduated. That number scared you a little, but you had a job lined up, and a job felt like the answer to everything. The company was Harrow Logistics Group, a regional freight company with a few hundred employees across 3 warehouses and 1 office building. Stable, people called it. Your parents liked that word. Your first day was a Wednesday in late August. A woman named Carol from Human Resources met you at the front desk and told you within 2 minutes that she had worked there 16 years, the way people do when a number becomes part of their identity. She walked you through the break room with its 2 vending machines, and one perpetually complained about microwave, then led you to your desk, a small gray cubicle in a row of identical gray cubicles, none of them near a window. A welcome folder sat on the keyboard with forms to sign and a company pen that stopped working within a week. To your left, a man named Peter argued calmly with someone about a shipment 3 days late, his voice flat with the patience of a decade of repetition. To your right, a woman close to your age stared at a routing spreadsheet without looking up. You took a breath and told yourself this was the beginning of something. In a lot of ways, it was just not the something you imagined. The first year felt fine. You were learning the systems, meeting people, cashing a paycheck of $48,000 a year, which after taxes and rent and loan payments left barely enough to notice by month's end. But you were young, and young people are good at believing there is plenty of time. Your manager, Renata, 36, was always first in and usually last out. She taught you the systems and the phrasing that made an email sound firm without sounding rude. Always end with "please advise," she said. It signals you are waiting on them, not the other way around. You wrote it down without realizing you would type that exact phrase hundreds of times in the years ahead. Your days settled into a rhythm you could draw with your eyes closed. Mornings clearing overnight tickets and updating trackers. Afternoons in meetings about problems already solved in an email nobody read. You sat in a conference room with a projector that never quite focused and nodded, along with slides about quarterly performance. You absorbed the vocabulary without thinking about it. Let us table that for now. I will loop you in offline. Take this as an action item. Words that sounded important and meant almost nothing. Lunch was 30 minutes, mostly eaten at your desk. A sandwich made the night before because deciding about food in the moment felt like one decision too many. Your commute never changed. 22 minutes if the light on Route 9 cooperated, closer to 40 if it did not. You used to listen to podcasts on the drive. After a while, you noticed you were not really listening, just filling the silence so your own thoughts would not get too loud. On Fridays, people loosened up a little, wore jeans, left early if Renata was in a good mood. Sometimes a group went to a sports bar near the office for cheap wings and the same 3 stories told in rotation. On Sundays, without fail, a tight feeling settled into your chest around 4 in the afternoon. You would check your email out of habit, see a quick note from Renata, and feel your stomach drop the exact same way every time. People at work called it the Sunday dread, like it was a shared joke, like it was simply the cost of being an adult. The second year moved faster and felt smaller. You had learned everything the role could teach you. You could run the reports without thinking, sit through a meeting on autopilot, answer an email before you had fully read it. The work became something your hands did while your mind sat somewhere else. You started noticing the clock more than the work itself, minutes moving in small, stingy increments like they resented giving themselves to you. You tried to change something once, building a simple shared tracker on a Saturday that would have cut a full afternoon of manual updates from everyone's week. Renata looked at it during a one-on-one and said it was a nice idea, but the current process was what corporate expected. You closed your laptop and did not bring up another idea for a long time. Renata was not cruel. She had 11 years in, a mortgage, 2 kids in school, a version of stability she was not willing to risk. What unsettled you was realizing you were slowly turning into her, one routine at a time. You noticed the sameness everywhere, the same coffee order, the same 15-minute walk at lunch just to feel outside air, the same 3 shows at night because deciding on something new took more energy than you had left. You looked around and saw people who had been there 15, 20 years, hair gone gray while everything else about their days stayed exactly the same. You caught your reflection in a dark computer screen and did not recognize the tired version of yourself looking back. You were 25, quietly wondering whether this was actually the plan or just the part nobody had warned you would last this long. The 3rd year is when something in you finally shifted. Not all at once, but the way water wears down stone. Slowly enough you barely noticed until the shape of things had changed. You were updating the same tracker you had built years earlier, the one nobody wanted to change, when a thought landed with unusual weight. This is it. This is what I am doing with my one life. You started noticing small, uncomfortable details, the way Renata sighed before answering a simple question, the way a coworker had stopped even pretending to care because good enough had quietly become the standard everyone accepted. One night at the sports bar, a coworker named Devon told the same story he always told, and the table laughed in all the same places it always did, and you realized nobody there was actually happy. They were comfortable. Those are not the same thing. That night, you could not sleep. You opened your laptop and typed questions into a search bar you had never taken seriously before. How to build income outside a job. What financial independence actually means. Ways to make money with skills you already have. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, something clicked. You did not need to become wealthy or build the next big idea. You needed leverage, a way to trade less of your time for the same or more money, one small piece at a time. You started with the boring stuff first, moving your savings, just under $7,000, out of an account paying almost nothing into one paying over 4%, a 10-minute fix that immediately felt like the first useful financial decision you had made in years. You built a spreadsheet and tracked every dollar leaving your account for a month. The numbers embarrassed you a little. Over $90 on coffee you barely remembered drinking, $60 on delivery apps out of pure exhaustion, 3 streaming subscriptions you had not opened in months. You canceled what you did not use, made coffee at home in a cheap machine, packed lunch the night before. Small changes, individually forgettable, together pushing your monthly savings from under $200 to over $500. For the first time in years, you felt something close to control. The 4th year is when you actually built something. It started small and slightly ridiculous, a neighbor throwing out an old wooden dresser with good bones and a beat-up finish. You dragged it home, sanded it over a weekend, refinished it with stain that cost $15, and sold it online for $140. It felt like magic, except it was not magic. It was just noticing value other people had stopped seeing. You did it again with mismatched dining chairs, an old record cabinet, a rusted bike frame rebuilt with hardware store parts. What started as a weekend hobby turned into steady income. $300 one month, then $500, then closer to $800 as you got faster and better at spotting pieces worth saving. A neighbor mentioned you to a friend moving out of state who needed to offload an entire apartment fast. You bought the lot for almost nothing and resold piece by piece for several times what you paid. Your network kept quietly expanding through word of mouth alone. All the while, you still had the day job, the one paying $52,000 a year, the one hollowing you out a little more every quarter. You started pulling back at work, doing exactly what was required and nothing beyond it. Renata noticed, asked if everything was okay, said you seemed distracted. You told her you were just tired. She nodded and let it go, because as long as the work still got done, that was all she really needed from you. The 5th year is when you made the actual decision. You were sitting in another meeting, a slide deck full of projections nobody in the room would remember by the following week, and you looked around the table. 12 tired faces, most of them older than you, most of them counting down years to a retirement that still felt impossibly far away. None of them were leaving. They were going to keep sitting in those chairs until someone eventually handed them a certificate and a handshake on the way out. You realized, with total clarity, that you did not want that ending. That night, you opened a spreadsheet and ran real numbers. If you kept saving $500 a month into an index fund at historical returns, you would have meaningful money in a decade. If the furniture business kept growing even modestly, that number would climb faster. You set a target, $45,000 in savings and investments, enough of a cushion to leave without free-falling. At the time, you had about $14,000 saved. At roughly $1,700 a month between paycheck savings and side income, you calculated you could hit that number in a little under 18 months. It felt almost boring how simple the math actually was. You just had to keep doing what you were already doing, on purpose, with an end date attached to it. The next year and a half was not glamorous. You kept the job, kept flipping furniture on weekends, picked up small freelance work, helping a couple of local shops clean up their online listings. Nothing impressive, just useful, paid work. You tracked every dollar earned and saved in the same spreadsheet you started years earlier. You opened a retirement account and began contributing to a simple, low-cost index fund every month, buying steadily and letting it sit. 18 months later, almost exactly on schedule, you hit $45,000. Something in your chest finally loosened. You walked into Renata's office on an ordinary Thursday and told her you were resigning. She blinked, caught off guard, and asked if you had another job lined up. You said no. She asked if this was some kind of extended break. You said, in a way, yes. She offered a small raise on the spot. You thanked her and declined. You cleaned out your desk that afternoon. A small plant, a chipped mug, a photo of your family taped to the cubicle wall. A few coworkers looked at you like you had lost your mind. A few looked almost envious. You took the stairs down instead of the elevator, all 4 flights, because you wanted to feel every one of them on the way out. You got in your car at 11 in the morning on a weekday, with no traffic on the road because everyone else was still exactly where you used to be. You drove home a completely different way than you ever had before, just because you could. That was 14 months ago. 14 months of waking up without an alarm most days, of drinking coffee slowly at your own kitchen table instead of gulping it in a parking lot. You still work, more than most people assume, but almost none of it feels like the old version of work. The furniture business has grown into something real, with a small storage unit and a handful of regular buyers who reach out directly now. The freelance work turned into a short list of steady clients who pay well and pay on time. You build a couple of simple digital templates, expense trackers, and content calendars for small business owners, and sell them quietly online for modest, recurring income that shows up whether or not you are actively working that week. Your investments have grown past $60,000 now, not from any dramatic breakthrough, but because you kept adding to them steadily and left them alone. You still live in a modest apartment, still drive the same car. Nothing about your lifestyle looks flashy from the outside. But your relationship with money and time has completely changed. You occasionally see old coworkers post updates online, still describing the same meetings, the same deadlines, the same countdown to Friday. You feel no superiority looking at those posts, only a strange, quiet recognition, because that used to be you. And it could still be you if you had made one different choice back then. What you carry from all of it is simple. Nobody announced your exit. There was no dramatic scene, nothing anyone would have noticed from the outside while it was happening. It happened in the margins, in ordinary evenings and weekends, in small decisions nobody was watching you make. The routine so many people accept is not actually a fixed track. It only feels that way because almost everyone around you agreed to stop questioning it. The way out was never about working harder inside the same system. It was about quietly building something on the side until the side became the whole thing. You think back sometimes to all those mornings staring at the same stretch of road, all those meetings that could have been a single sentence, all that energy handed over without a second thought. Then you look at your life now, at mornings that belong to you, at work you actually choose. And the difference still catches you off guard sometimes. There is still fear, of course. You think about slow months, clients who might disappear, markets that might drop. But then you check your numbers, the same simple spreadsheet you have kept for years, and you remember you built a cushion for exactly this kind of worry. You have savings. You have skills nobody can take from you. You have proof, written in your own numbers, that you already did the hardest part once. The real lesson was never about the amount of money. It was about realizing you actually had a choice the entire time. You simply had not been shown it yet. You are not your job title. You are not the paycheck that used to define your calendar. You are the sum of the small, unglamorous choices you make when nobody else is paying attention. Leaving does not have to be dramatic. It can be quiet, patient, built one evening and one weekend at a time, until one ordinary morning you wake up, pour your own coffee, look around a life you actually chose, and realize you are already out.